show it later if we can dig it out, that they admitted that this is one of the earliest times that the shrinkage is actually stopped and reversed back to growing. So that parlor trick of showing a satellite image of one of the poles during the summer when it starts shrinking and implying that it's all about to disappear when we know that it is a cyclical season thing, that huge fraud is imploding. And now, as you know, Der Spiegel last week came out and said, well, actual sea levels are dropping now. That's the global warming, when Al Gore promised that we'd already be underwater.
That's quite right. And indeed, earlier this year, I published a paper by Professor Niklas Mörner, who is the ranking world expert on sea level. And the title of the paper was "Sea Level is Not Rising." And this was in the spring, so he was well ahead of the curve here. And when he was due to introduce this paper at a Cambridge University climate conference that I was helping to organize, the organizers banned him from distributing the paper because they were so furious at the title, "Sea Level is Not Rising." And of course, ever since then, it's been dropping like a stone. And the excuse of the usual suspects is that this is because global warming has meant more rainfall, and therefore all the rain has gone on the land and it will eventually flow back into the ocean and the ocean will rise again. But frankly, these excuses that Gore and others come up with are beginning to wear terribly thin. And that the truth of the matter is that by a number of different measures, it's now been pretty well established that if we were to double the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere between now and the end of the century, that might cause maybe 1 Celsius of warming. That at the moment is most people's best guess, not the 3 or 4 or 6 or 11 that Gore and his mates have been saying. 1 Celsius, and that's harmless. And even if you wanted to try to stop the 3 or 4 or 6 Celsius that they have been trying to say will happen, it's 10 times cheaper to take the really rather small damage that such warming would cause than it is to try to make it go away.
But Lord Monckton,
yeah,
you've broken these numbers down. I mean, you don't like to toot your horn, but you've been a trailblazer. They've talked about your arrest in Europe, saying that you're a climate denier. He is now running promo videos. I couldn't watch much of the 24-hour garbage, but I did watch some of it. But I watched the promo videos saying, we're going after the deniers. Obama has launched this attack watch group that says report people to the authorities that criticize Obama. I mean, it seems they're really trying to go into an authoritarian mode. And he says, how dare them in this promo video say that carbon dioxide isn't a pollutant, the evil oil companies. But in truth, most of the big oil companies have actually been on the bandwagon for a while, and they want to use it to shut down their competition in coal. So that's another lie. What can you say about this call to criminally, because now it's happening to myself, to criminally come after us for denying our high priest Al Gore? A, I want you to comment on that. And then B, how high have, from ice core samples, carbon dioxide levels been in the past versus now?
Okay, hold on to your hats and let's do that second question first. If we go back to the Neoproterozoic era, which is 750 million years ago, you're too young to remember, Alex. At that time, there was 30% CO2 in the atmosphere. How do we know? Because it was at that time that the dolomitic rocks were formed, and dolomitic rock can only form if it precipitates out from the sea, if there is a partial pressure of CO2 above the sea of at least 30%. We can tell this by doing experiments in the laboratory, so we know that. 30%. And how much is it today? Is it 5%? No. 10%? No. 2%? No. 1%? No. It's 0.04% today. And even when it was 30% in the atmosphere, glaciers a mile high came and went twice at sea level and at the equator. So there's no way that CO2 could possibly have the enormous warming effect which Gore and the usual suspects have been trying to pretend. It simply isn't happening. And now, as to this desperate attempt to criminalize you and me, Alex, for saying that we are climate deniers, notice how they use that word deniers. With all its overtones of Holocaust denial, they do it every day. Nobody bats an eyelid. But when in Australia recently, I pointed out that one of their economists had expressed opinions that were effectively fascist opinions, oh, how Lord Lundy cried. All the left, all the way across the world, were saying Monckton is terrible. He has said that Professor X is a fascist. Well, no, I didn't say that. I said the opinion he expressed in saying that there is no alternative but to believe exactly what one narrow version of climate science tells us.
Well, hold on, Lord Monckton. A bunch of them are in the news calling for green fascism. Not the particular guy, but I've seen it all over the news. Carbon rationing, carbon cards. They call it green fascism. And they say, we don't make any excuses. We need to be authoritarian. I've even seen Financial Times of London articles written by their foreign editor. One was titled, "And Now for World Government," saying it needs to be authoritarian because the people won't do what's right. We'll just make them. I mean, you're one of the top researchers. I mean, how many of them have said things like this?
It's been happening all over the place. In fact, the European Union, secretly now, because when I first exposed it, they put it underground, they are already drawing up plans for a European and eventually international environmental criminal court, where anyone like you and me who dares to say that there are real scientific doubts published in the peer-reviewed literature about how far this scare is going to go, then these plans are already being laid as we speak. And the only way to stop it is to vote out governments that go along with this rubbish. Now, in Britain, that gives us a problem because all the major parties still go along with this rubbish, despite the mounting evidence they've got it wrong. And I want to come on to that briefly, Alex, because the fact is they have got it wrong. If we go back to 1950, how much warming has occurred since then? Well, it's warming at a rate of about 0.7 Celsius since that time. That's the equivalent of 1 Celsius per century. Go back to 1850. Let's imagine the fastest rate of warming that lasted for more than a decade since 1850 were to become the average rate of warming over the next 90 years. How much warming would we get over the whole century? 1 Celsius. Go back to 1750. And look at the amount of radiative forcing, as the IPCC calls it, that they say has happened. How much temperature change since 1750? Only about 0.8 to 0.9 Celsius. And so how much warming would we expect to see over the next century if that carried on? Answer, 1 Celsius.
But Lord Monckton,
you do the sums. It's only going to be 1 Celsius for a doubling. There isn't a problem. And that's their problem because they have told us there's going to be a problem. They now know as well as you and I do that the actual record of temperatures is simply not responding as they said. And so the only way to force us to obey what they say is to say that if we dare to point out the obvious, we will go to prison for it. Well, I will be proud to go there.
Lord Monckton, specifically talking here with you, you always go over the scientific evidence, and you always repeat it over and over again, and you've been proven in your reports time and time again. I can't think of a time that I've seen you really be mistaken because you're going off scientific research and facts that are available. 2 years ago, the ClimateGate emails come out where they're lying and organizing the structure in their different grants around the world to do this. We know that their agenda is a power grab and to be able to shut down competition that isn't part of their inside little club. But now, I mean, if you even look at the plans they want, and this is what I've been successful talking to their cult followers with, is to explain, if China's building multiple new coal power plants a week, and we can't even build really any here a year, and they're shutting down old ones, and ours are much cleaner than China, and it's one world, well, then why is shutting down our plants and moving them to China, where they're even dirtier, going to help? And they go, wow, that's a really good point. I mean, getting all the science aside, their solutions of paying Al Gore and Lord Rothschild carbon money is not going to fix anything, and it just allows them to turn the green police loose on the general public, and it's nothing but a fascistic power grab. And I think at the end of the day, that's the key.
This is quite right. I mean, I've got a paper out for review at the moment with the Journal of Energy Policy, which goes into this very question of just how useless it actually is if you try to make global warming go away. And just for the sake of the argument, I've pretended, even though I don't believe a word of it, that the amount of warming we're likely to get is going to be as big as the usual suspects pretend that it is. I said, okay, let's go along with the so-called official figures. And then let's look at the solution.